Hello, Andrew.
Hey, buddy. I am excited to chat today and do a little unscripted conversation.
Yeah, we have a topic every week,
Mm.
and then we come in and we can kind of stay on a focus. I think that's been valuable, but I also feel like there's something that I'm interested and curious about where we will go where we don't even know necessarily. That's more of just like you and I talking.
I think that's also cool because that's why we started doing this podcast in the first place, right? It was
Right.
you and I were talking about our lives. We had a set time that we just talked every week, and the conversations were so freaking good and deep and meaningful. It was like, God, we should record these. We should share them with other
Right.
people. They'd be helpful if other people could listen in. So I think it's always helpful and valuable just to be real with this stuff. And it's fun teaching on a topic, but it's fun just bullshitting with you too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just today was feeling into and thinking about us chatting and all the different places that we've gone in this conversation and all the different ways that what it's been a lot of like you said, a lot of teaching.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us with here's what we've learned, here's what works, here's what we can maybe bring to a listener that might be helpful for you as we move forward. But I also feel like there's something to be said for uh, just some notes from you and me of like, what are you feeling this week? What's percolating for you that may not necessarily be helpful for someone, but just is interesting. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it doesn't need to be a teaching moment. Maybe take us somewhere from your life that with Dawn. I think we stay on subject, but what what's going on with you that just you might want to share?
I think something we talked about a little bit before we hit record is actually an interesting piece to start with here was I had this breakdown in my boat trailer on Sunday night, and Monday I had to dive in and repair trailer bearings, which I won't say I had no idea what I was doing, but I had as close to no idea what I was doing as I could, just as little information as necessary to even dig into it. And I did, and it was slow and tedious, and I screwed some stuff up and had to redo some things and whatever, but eventually I got it all done and fixed it and made it work again. And I just had to buy the parts and I didn't have to pay someone else. And it really had me thinking about the value that I've gotten in my life out of just trying to be competent at shit, at valuing competence and my ability to figure things out. And why that plays into Dawn and I is I was sitting there, like I said, elbow deep in grease, looking like a freaking, you know, I was out of some mud pit or something. And she's like, God, that's sexy. Like, yeah, to her, why is it sexy? Because it shows competence. Like the
Right.
stuff that makes a woman turned on by you isn't like how pretty you look.
Hmm.
It's it's the display of the ability to handle unforeseen circumstances without getting fucked up over it. One of the things that she said while I was working on it, she said, I admire the way that you can work your way through this without getting frustrated.
Right. And I think it's also you just taking it on, like you mentioned that you didn't have a lot of experience with it. Part of competency is just initiative. I mean, it's such a baseline, basic starting point, but it's not being afraid to try something uh, that you don't know, you don't have competency
Mm.
with at first, but that you are going to go for it. And I think it's also like self-reliance too. Like I feel like what I hear there too is you being able to take care of it yourself and taking the time to learn and going through that whole process. And I think her seeing that, there's going to be situations in your life where you're going to be, there's a moment, and are you going to skirt away from that moment, or are you going to go headlong into that moment and address it and take up the initiative to take care of business and not be afraid, and like you said, not be frustrated and not be patient in that, and take your time to do
Yeah.
it, and move slow if you
And
need to.
and women, like, it's just the, well, here's the thing. You talk to women about what they think is the most attractive thing in a man. It's almost always confidence, right? It's not six pack. It's not like, funny is usually up there with confident. But how do you actually be confident? Like, with not just like the bravado, not the machismo kind of confidence, but how do you have an actual like embodied sense of confidence? It's by trusting in yourself that you can handle whatever the hell happens.
Yeah,
Like,
it's doing shit. Like, it's that simple. It's like setting out to do something and then doing it, and it being something that's harder for you, just a little harder than you thought maybe you could do, and then you do it, and then it then the confidence builds from that, and it can be in every day. I think about that too. I think that's an interesting thing that you bring. Like, what is my job? What is my role? It truly is to build confidence. Like, if I'm not bringing confidence to her and I'm not feeling good, that's probably the number one thing that trips her up or triggers her. And I've had to deal with my own sense of being like, that's not fair. Like, I should be allowed to not feel confident. I should be allowed to be going through my own weakness or my own vulnerability. I'm allowed. And the thing is that this kind of relationship, this dynamic that we have, you could do that, but I'm going to be reflected back to me. Hey, wait, that feels like you're dropping me. I'm going to react in a way that's a little more. There's going to be a situation where that your structure of the relationship is going to be affected by that. And so the confidence then becomes my job. Like, literally, it's not a option. I have to be confident. And it's not a bullshit confident, because she can smell that and she can whiff that, and building that confidence and doing things every day to build that. I noticed you snickering. I feel like you're dying to share something
uh,
there.
I want to talk about this. It's not fair because, God, I've had to have said that in my own head about 1,000 fucking times over the last 4 years. Like,
It's not fair.
it's not fair, right? Like, and I
Yeah.
get it. That's the victim mentality. And this is, by the way, I don't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my journal is where I go to bitch and victim
You should title your
puke.
journal "It's Not Fair."
Like, it's just where I do the victim puking, where it's just like, if I'm feeling like trash inside, it's got to come out, right?
Right.
You can't just pretend it's not there. So it's not fair is one of the constant refrains, because, guess what? I know that I'm like Mr. Internet dumb guy who talks about being grounded and emotionally solid, but guess what? I still get triggered sometimes too. And then sometimes my triggers set off hers. And when you're in that place, it's like, fuck, like, she gets to be in this, but I'm like,
I'm not allowed to. Yeah, that's the total "It's Not Fair" moment, isn't it? It's
exactly.
like, oh wait, she gets to express and be in all in her shit, and then as soon as I get to be even a little bit of my shit, even my frequency's off. I'm saying all the right things and doing it all, but she can tell I'm fucking triggered.
Yep.
I'm, I'm like, that's not fair, but it just, that refrain does go. So I know what you're saying.
And that's the thing, like, it's not fair, but it's not
No, it's
supposed to be
not.
fair. It's
No, we wouldn't want it that way. If it was fair, we'd be like every other relationship. We're not interested in what's fair. We're interested in a dynamic that's not fair. It's not fair to her. She's got to be led by us.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah, she has
there's
her own version of it's not fair. I want to do what I want to do. No.
right, right. No, I think this is part of the price to pay. I think we all have a price to pay. You pay to play. Like, there is something that we have to give up in order to get something. I mean, that's maturity by its definition. But I also feel like it's even more extreme. And I think one of the things that every day I feel into more and more is that it's different, meaning what's expected of me is different than what's expected of her. What I expect from her is different than what she expects from me. And what's expected of me is not necessarily something that is specific to the day. Like there's not like, oh, I need you to be like this today. It's a all the time. It's more of like I feel like I'm expected to be like a the police or the fire department, like an expectation that you're just always there, you're available, and you come and you don't make it about you. And you're, I heard this book and he was talking about being in a relationship at a call center where people call up and they're like they have their vacuum cleaners broken and they need help, and that the person on the other line is like, oh my god, my vacuum cleaner's broken too, it's terrible, and hey, and they start needing your help from them, and they're like, no, 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 it's a one-way stream at that, at the support line. That's what it has to be. Is like we have to be the customer service person or the DMV or the cop. We can't make it about us. And as
But
soon as we start making it about us, then all of a sudden it's a different dynamic. We're not in that game anymore. We're playing something else. And that may happen, but we have to minimize that. And if we don't minimize that, then we're not in this dynamic.
yeah, then you're in an equal thing. You're in a not equal but same, because
Right.
the way we say it is, like it isn't a better than worse than, like I'm greater than her and she's less than me kind of a dynamic. It's an we're opposite from each other. We're
Right.
equally valuable and important, but we function in opposite ways. And the more you look at that, the more it just turns out to be true.
Right.
And
No, it's so
sometimes it's
true.
not fair.
No, it's not.
What else is going
No,
on with
it's
you? Like, what did you want to bring up here today?
well. Another thing I was thinking about was the benefits. Like it's not something we've talked about. I was just kind of reflecting on this. You know, there is this work that's done in what we're doing, but the fact that every single moment, every single day, there is a commitment that if I show up well and done my work and right or the right energy, this person will respond in a way that I want her to respond, or I will know how to deal with her response, and her response is in service ultimately of her being in her feminine. And that commitment to her being in her feminine and me being in my masculine, there's great fucking benefit from that. There's great rewards from that. There is just like, it's very clear. And yes, there's a sexual rewards, but there's also just the reward energetically of a great feeling that you get. That there's just a reward, and that this commitment to this woman that every day becomes more and more beautiful and more in her feminine, and that it's up to me. Like the rules are clear. It's like I do my work, I show up, and all that what that means, I get something from it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's not always true in most relationships. The guys might show up, or I've been in relationships, no matter how much I work, this person over here is not committed to being in their feminine. And thus, there's a competitive kind of vibe to it. And anytime you have two guys going, you're either going to have a hierarchy, or you're going to have great teamwork, or you're going to have some sort of competition. I guess that's the
Hmm.
higher word, hierarchy. And the teamwork, when it's like you and me, that feels good. But if it's a woman and you're just always in that teamwork kind of energy, it doesn't necessarily equate to polarity. And that polarity that we talked about is yummy. There's a good vibe feeling. Like it just feels good. And that feeling that feels good is the reward. That reward is there and is possible all the time. And I was just thinking about how, God, no matter how much shit that we've been through and all the different things that I've been through recently that have been really challenging, the commitment to this dynamic makes it guaranteed that when I've done my work and I come out of it and I'm in a better place, there's something beautiful on the other side. And that is an incredible, uh, that's like why I'm here. I mean, this is the point. This is why I love Rachel, why I'm in this relationship, why I'm committed to this, why she's my person, like why she's mine, is that part of that is that reward. But it's
Hmm.
also that it elicits this work on me. Like it asks of me to do this. And I want to do it because I see the tangible benefits of doing the work.
Yeah, you've got when you have two people who are both all in and invested in making it as good as it can be, then the end result of that is that yeah, then you're both going to end up more happy, more satisfied, more having all of your needs met. And
Yep.
as sometimes it's good to be the dom. Sometimes it sucks to be the sub. But sometimes it's good to be the sub and sometimes it sucks to be the dom. It goes both ways. And I think the thing that I've learned the most in that is like, even the times when I'm not showing up, when I'm in my triggers, when I'm in my shit, and she's feeling that, she starts to fucking rage, man. Maybe not actually rage, but she's frustrated and she's triggered and she's upset. She's feeling unsafe and she's coming back at me. Like, even that's happening for me. Even that is actually what I need in the moment because I need to see that I'm not holding the space strongly enough for her to be able to be in that place where she wants to be and I want her to be, which is to be having fun and to be easy and free. And that's what we all want. So even when she's not in that spot in the moment, she's showing me what she needs from me in order to be able to give me what I want.
Exactly. Just the other day I was in the kitchen, and my kids were, it was birthday, one of them, my daughter's birthday. There were all these different things happening, and there was a lot of work stuff, and there was just a lot going on. And Rachel was stressed, and I could feel it. And I was watching, and I went up to her to sort of bring her out of that stress, and she just kind of was like pushed me a little bit, like just was like not met by the way that I had approached. And I just kind of caught her in that moment. I was like, wait a second. And we started talking, and it quickly, I realized that as she was doing that, I got triggered by her response. And anyway, I just ended up leaving, and we ended up talking about it later. And I was telling to her, but I was reflecting on it and what she had brought to me. And I was realizing I was actually came to her and was like affected, triggered by her being off. And I needed her to feel better so I could feel better. And she
Codependency
could
101.
feel, right. And she could feel me not being that solid anchor that she needed, but instead being somebody who needed her to chill out so I could feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And it was subtle, it wasn't like really explicit. But so when she kind of came back at me, I could recognize, I was like, oh my gosh, I think there was a little bit of that. And there was also just me not recognizing the situation and all of what was taking place. And then when she kind of reflect, I just immediately allowed myself to kind of get caught up a little bit, and then was like, oh, wait, I'm not going to react in the best way possible right now. I ended up just leaving, needing a moment to kind of have some space with it. But it was a great example of where it wasn't like anything really bad happened. Nobody flipped out. Everything was chill. If you had a video camera, you wouldn't even known anything happened. It was all in these like little subtle things, but we ended up having a great conversation from it. I was able to really hear from her about some things that was helpful in the way that she needed to pave the way towards touch, and how I could do that better, how I could be more attuned to what's occurring in the moment and her nervous system, how I could support that, how I could be also recognizing in myself how much am I doing my work to not letting her feelings impact me. And it really brought up for me how much I think if someone were to ask me, what is conscious dominance and what is your commitment in your relationship in one sentence, I realized, I was like, I think I've got it. And I was thinking to myself, it's, do I let do I dictate, do I dominate the energy, or does the energy dominate me? And the the energy, being the frequency, the energy of people. So, like, if you walk into a room, what's the energy in the room? What's her energy? Where is she in her fight or flight? Where is she in her energy and her feelings and all this? Am I letting her energy dominate me? Or am I surrendering, submitting, and being affected by her energy? Or am I able to bring my energy and let that energy dictate the mood? And my energy being something that's ultimately, when it's in a good solid energy, it's loving, it's kind, it's spacious,
Hmm.
and it's clear, and it's not necessarily me and my ego. It's me being a vehicle for what's of service in that moment, and it has that kind of quality. And I can tell the difference when she's getting rattled, and then I'm allowing her rattling to affect me and impact me. And I think that this is the same case of where, if we go in public and she's seeing me being affected by other people, she loses trust. She's like, oh, this guy's getting all rattled up and pissed. Are you going to match him, get all pissed too? Or are you going to be able to calm him down, and or a woman's trying to, be all seductress? Are you letting her influence you? Like, in each one of these moments, it's ultimately being a master of our internal energy and being attuned to our own space. And what I mean by energy is this, in the interior. Whether you want to, it's your feelings, but it's a lot more than that. It's your chi, it's your life force, it's your capacity to be and do what's necessary in that moment.
This is confidence.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
again, this is confidence
That's exactly it. Energy, confidence, same thing.
and
Yes,
charisma. I
charisma. They
love this.
all.
I love this word charisma, or
It's true.
riz, as they say.
That's what the kids say these
What
days.
the kids these days. God, whoever thought I'd be 44 and talking about the kids. But I've I like studying charisma and the body language and energy of people who are highly charismatic because it's fascinating to watch. There's a YouTube channel, I think it's like Charisma on Command, something like
Oh,
that,
yeah, 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 yeah.
where they show video clips of people like Matthew McConaughey or Craig Ferguson, and break down what it is that they do and how it is that they behave. And there's this energy of just being completely comfortable in their own skin, right?
Mhm.
That's an important piece of charisma. Is it's not about how you act, it's not about playing a part, it's actually about not giving a fuck about acting or playing any
True.
parts whatsoever. But it's, have you ever been in a room with somebody? Does someone come to mind where you've been in a room with someone and that person's energy calmed the whole freaking room?
Yeah, I mean, I've had teachers that do that. I think a good teacher does that. A good high school teacher is that way.
I had a
I think
bouncer.
bouncers can do that. Yeah, exactly. Like at a club, they know how to do that really well. They don't want to go fight they don't want to control. They've got to calm the whole
Yeah.
situation. I've seen judges do that. I've been in a courtroom, and there are certain people that are lawyers that have been around. I've been around that. I've
Hmm.
seen that energy. I've seen I think good waiters. You go to a restaurant, and the other day we were at a restaurant, and it was very hectic, and there were a lot of people wanting to get in and do and all this. And the person, the who owned the restaurant, was actually greeting people at the beginning, and he did it so well. He was able to, like, take people and neutralize the situation and handle. It was a work of art, and it calmed everybody down. And I
Hmm.
think restaurants are a good example of where really good uh, servers and hosts can do that well. Bartenders, I
Yeah.
think I've seen bartenders when everybody's at the bar and like crazy, and they're just super chill. I think bartenders can be really good at that as well.
This
Um,
one person, this one bouncer, it was at this little beachside bar and grill thing down in Florida that we were at years ago. And this guy's name was Nick. And I will never forget him because he's about my size. He's about 6'4", probably 220. Like, he's a big dude. And you watched him look over this place like he was a lion and like this was his kingdom. And he just kept an eye on everything. And he walked around and he looked at everything. But there was something about this guy that made me, a guy who was about his same size, has really nothing to be afraid of. I felt safer around that guy.
yeah.
Like, I felt calmer around that guy.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about him that was just so grounded, so solid in the energy, right? It wasn't about what he was doing or how he was acting. You just feel it. Like, he just absorbed
Yeah.
the, like, any tension that was in that room. He just absorbed it.
Yeah. I know it's beautiful to be around. I recently was in Hawaii, and I feel like the Hawaiian people. There's some Hawaiian guys that I know and women, but that culture, they have a way of just absorbing and shifting energy and calming everything down, and just all the crazy tourists and how it just really can bring that energy down to a more peaceful place. Yeah, it is a powerful. I feel like something I've experienced in the East too. The being in Japan and being
Mm.
in Asia, there's a different frequency there that you can feel in the air, a different energy, a different riz that's not all about when we think of, one of my concerns about using the word like charisma is when it becomes kind of manufactured and you've got that kind of car salesman, salesy kind of type, and they do all the right ways of being charismatic, or
Yeah.
the pickup artist, or it becomes something that's really externalized, and it feels phony and kind of fake, and you can feel and smell that. And the
That's not
difference between
that's not charisma
that.
to me. That's a performance. It's an
Okay,
act.
well, see, that's important to differentiate,
Hmm.
because I think sometimes when you hear the word charisma, it's almost like people like learn how to do it and then they go out and they think they're doing it, when it's really this inside work that you have to do. That you feel it in someone, like the guy you mentioned, or a lot of the people that I've been around that have that. They just walk into a room, they don't have to do anything. That charisma really is, like you said, it's comfortable in their own skin. It's actually less is more. There's a chill quality to them that's just really like a solidity to it. That's just a different vibe.
Here's another word we've used a lot, but describes this well: is presence.
Yeah, for sure. For
And
sure.
something that I teach to men in my courses and coaching and stuff is this concept of we have to be present in our bodies. Like, presence
Mhm.
means not being in your head. It means not being stuck in your spinning thoughts. It means actually being where you are. And that's another like defining characteristic of conscious dominance, of embodied charisma, whatever, however, all these things, confidence, they're the same thing. It's about being present in the moment. It's about really being where you are
Mhm.
and being comfortable and okay being there. And the one example that I loved that they showed in this Charisma on Command YouTube channel was Matthew McConaughey on a talk show. He's on a panel with there's like 4 or 5 other famous actors, actresses there getting interviewed. I think it might have been Graham Norton or something like that. And they're all sitting there very like upright and astute, and Matthew McConaughey, and they've got their like drink on the table in front of them. He's sitting on the edge of the couch. He's kind of like, he's got his drink on the floor, and he picks his drink up, takes a sip of it, like spits the ice cube out to the side. Like, he's like, he doesn't give a fuck. He's just being himself, and he's
No,
there.
it's
He's in the
totally
moment,
true.
and he's confident in himself.
Yeah. No, I think it's really, really true. I feel like you could feel that, and you can't perform that. Some guys will kind of, that's who he is, so that works for him. He's got a bit of that. He's a little bit more of like, not quite the same as like Robert Downey Jr., but he's got a little bit that same sort of like, he's got charisma, like when the same way that
Mm-hmm.
McConaughey does it in a different way that's not your sort of normal standardized like machismo kind of thing, but it's damn confident,
Yeah.
you know?
It's real for them, and that's what matters.
Right. Right.
And that's
Right.
like that's why people can't copy me. They can't copy you. They can't do what we do, but they can learn from our experience to then apply it to their own life and do it in a way that works for them.
And I was thinking about this, actors I think are fun to look at in movies and old movies. And one of the things is masculinity through the ages. And I was just kind of reflecting and looking at some of these. There's a old movies with Fred Astaire, who's the dorkiest guy. He just looks like a big goofball, but dude can dance.
Dance.
And
That's
can
his.
he ever hold a woman and it's so not your typical Riz, but he's got Riz. Like he just go watch some Fred Astaire dance scenes, and that dude just has a way, and it commands, and that's its own conscious dominance. Like he leads her and moves her and that's competence, it's charisma, it's all of these things, and it comes in these different forms. And even someone like Frank Sinatra. Like Frank Sinatra is another great example of somebody who's not your typical like big dude, but boy did he have that charisma and he had that riz and that energy. And you look back at some of these iconic figures and you really look at them and kind of study them, you realize, oh my God, they're just really, really good at being themselves. And they take being themselves to a whole art and they become sort of an icon that no one's like, you just know what that is when that's like that. Like Bob Dylan's like that.
Yeah.
He's got that quality that's kind of goofball with his hair that's curly and his voice that's raspy. And he's just himself. He's just really, really, really good at being himself. And you look at these different people through history and you realize, oh, they don't all fit a type. They're just really good at being authentic and being themselves and being true to themselves and being really fucking competent, really good at something, and then sharing that and being super generous with the world with their gifts.
And people think that sure, it's easy for Frank Sinatra to be confident. He's Frank Sinatra. It's easy for Matthew McConaughey to be confident. He's Matthew McConaughey. He's rich and he's gorgeous and he's famous. And they assume that the confidence comes from the fame, from the success, from the money, from whatever. And I've met more than my fair share of famous people in my day. And I would say every single one of them became famous because of their confidence, because of their comfort in their own skin, because of how, like you said, how comfortable they were being themselves. It
Mhm.
it's a it's it doesn't come from getting somewhere. Getting somewhere happens because you are not caring about what other people think about you. You're not trying to put on a performance or be someone else. Just get really damn comfortable being yourself.
It's so true. I mean, that's what's fun to listen to these long form interviews of some of these artists. I was There's a really interesting Miley Cyrus with Joe Rogan where it's a long thing and you realize, oh my God, this woman is uh, such an artist and she's such a consummate artist. And you see how she comes out and she's full of contradictions and full of paradox. But ultimately, after listening, you're like, she's just so much herself. And she's transmuted and taken all of these challenging things that she's had and turned it into art and reinvented herself. And it reminded me also of like someone like Kanye West, who's very full of contradictions himself and all over the place. But what he's consistent with is being Kanye West. And these people that are kind of these spark, through our culture, if you kind of do a deep dive on them, you realize they're really good at just continuing to stick with their commitment to themselves and to being themselves and sharing themselves and being in that alchemizing energy of authenticity of what that means to be and to follow what they love, even if it disrupts things and other people don't like it. They're going to find people that do really like it and do really line up with that?
We can't want to be loved by everyone, right? If
Right.
the only way to be loved by everyone is to be trying to put on a show, if we're really being authentic, half the people are going to love you and half the people are going to hate you. That's just
Right.
kind of the way that it works. And you've got to
Right.
be okay with people having your haters. You got to be okay with people disliking you, because
Right.
you can only, I think you can really only be loved to the same extent that you are also hated.
Yeah. Risking that.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes along with our women too. Like if we don't, I find that if I'm there placating or pleasing or not being true to myself, that like leads right into this, because one of the things that she sniffs is if I'm not being true, if I'm not being authentic because I'm trying to placate her in the moment, she ultimately, that might be cool for the moment, but it disrupts the energy and it ultimately does not serve me and does not serve our relationship because I am not leading her. And part of leadership, the whole definition of leadership is that you're going to do things that people are not going to like, but that serve the whole or serve the bigger picture. Otherwise, you're just going along to get along. And that's not leadership. That's
Yeah. I want to ask you,
from,
I want to ask you a question on that, because I'm curious if you have experienced finding yourself kind of maybe unintentionally looking for her permission
oh, yeah, for
in
sure.
certain things, like rather than just, if you know this is something that's right or something that you want to do, and just saying it,
Yep.
instead taking more of the covert route of trying to convince her that it's okay and get her to give you permission before you are willing or able to say that it's okay. Have you found yourself or experienced yourself doing that? And
Oh, I mean, I think we all, I mean, definitely. And it's subtle, and then it's not subtle, and it becomes really overt and clear. And it, again, it feels like one of those moments where it's counterintuitive. Like you feel like to do that would be to be selfish, and that there's still this part of us, at least I deal with this, where I realize, God, I still feel the effect of self judgment around anything that's termed selfish or that's about me or in service of me, and how much of that conditioning I still have, even though she's wanting me to be that way, even though she's the whole dynamic is that it's like the conditioning of my upbringing, the conditioning of our time, of our society, all of these things. I don't necessarily always trust my desires or my what I am wanting or what I'm craving. And if I am not trusting them and navigating them well and pushing them down, they don't go away. And in a way, it does a disservice. And it reminds me of what James Clear says about habits. You have to make a habit before you can improve the habit. That's a great thing that I think about. Don't just immediately try to improve the habit. Like you actually get a habit and then improve it
yeah, do it poorly but consistently, right?
consistently is really, really important. So often we get into a situation where we immediately want to start improving it and then we just lose the habit. But it's far more important to have a habit. It's just far more important to brush our teeth badly every night than to do it perfectly once a week. Like it's really, really, really.
Gross.
But you know what I mean? And so these habits, building a lot of it's habits. And part of the thing with desire and with craving, if we don't acknowledge them and own them, we can't improve upon them. We can't find a better way to do it and the only way to improve upon something is to acknowledge it and to create a habit around acknowledging what we actually want. Because the whole point of this is to live a life that is in service of us. Because if we're not in service of us and we're not, like I said earlier, feeling the rewards and the benefits of this life, we're not going to be motivated to do the actual work. I'm not going to be motivated to do the work that it takes because it's super hard unless I'm getting something from it. That's just human nature.
Hmm.
And the work, because the work is such a, it's not obvious that you need to do the work uh, unless you're confronted with a situation that provokes you to do the work. And then on the other side, there's something to be gained from doing the work.
And that's where, if we can be selfish enough to just say what we want, or to pursue what we want, or to go after it, rather than taking the needy approach, which is to try to pave a runway for an easy landing where we can have the thing without there being any bumps or any
Right.
challenges. Like, that's where neediness comes from, is we want something, but we aren't willing to speak up for it, so we're trying to manipulate the whole situation into being able to have it without any discomfort. That's the root of pretty much all neediness in my experience and in my life.
Every single problem that I have with Rachel, pretty much across the board, stems from me being needy
Yep.
in some way, shape, or form. If I could just own that this is what I need, that I'm feeling this way, I need this, I need you to be like this, and I'm direct, it's great. And you can even maintain the dynamic in a place of weakness.
Yeah.
But when as soon as I don't want to admit that I'm weak, and yet I'm needing something to be acknowledged that I'm going through something and I'm not clear about it, and then oh, it's just it
Yeah.
becomes a mess.
But if we can take that strong approach rather than the needy approach and just say this.
This is what I need. This is
Yep.
what I want.
This is what I want. This is what I need. Even this is what I'm going through,
Right.
as a statement of fact rather than a plea for help. Now, sometimes those things, when we say them, they're going to be confronting. They're going to challenge her, right? We have so many examples of this from our relationship over the last several years, where usually, especially 3-4 years ago, as we were getting started on this whole process, the way it would go is I would take the needy approach. She would freak out. We would like have this big breakdown, and then eventually I would just say it, and she'd be like, "Oh, okay." And then I learned, oh, that's actually works a lot better. I just speak up,
Oh
because
yeah.
I have a partner there who wants to meet my needs, who wants to give me what I want. I mean, it's one of Dawn's biggest turn-ons is giving me what I want. So sometimes it's going to be confronting, but it's the processing of why that's confronting that where all the good shit comes from. It's not
Oh,
that it's not trying to figure it out before you say it. It's by saying it, stirring some shit up, and then like whatever gets stirred up there, that's real.
it's so true. And I think the more that we're not afraid of the things that we want and that we're desiring, and
We feel
that
worthy of them.
that we feel worthy and that we crave, she could feel that. She could feel that in us. And I think sometimes we have to just go, I know I have to do it badly at first and not be afraid to just put myself out there in an awkward way or in a way that maybe may not be feeling the confidence, but yet it's more confident to act even when you're not feeling confident than it is to not act because you're not feeling confident.
Yeah.
So that's where I
Practice
think that
being
courage,
practice being direct. Have the courage to be
exactly, that's where
direct.
courage comes from. The word courage is like you're afraid and yet you still act. And then courage can also mean you still act even when you're not feeling confident. And the mood follows action. So the action is the necessary part of the relationship. It's not necessary that as much as I say and talk about energy and what's internalizing here, to get to that energy often is the other side of taking an action, an uncomfortable action that we may not feel like in the moment. And I, how many times and recently have I taken an action, done something that feels awful to do, that is the right thing to do, and that the right mood and energy follows that. And this happens again and again and again, especially around things that are triggering, or especially around arguments, especially around, when I feel like there's, like there's beast mode. I have something I call bitch mode, when I get into bitch mode. You know what I mean? And
Uh,
I know that once I'm there, I'm like, okay, I'm in, and you recognize it. Okay, I'm in bitch mode. I gotta walk. I gotta leave. I gotta do something to mitigate that, or I'm gonna say a script, even though I'm it's not what I feel like at all, but is necessary to not give bitch mode a voice. And
mhm.
that's a transitionary period to get back into more of a beast mode kind of mode.
Yeah. And it does get easier. That's the
Yeah.
thing. That's the
Oh
thing
yeah.
is like every time that you do that courageous thing, just like all the way back to the beginning of this, trailer bearings, right? Next time that I need to deal with trailer bearings, guess who knows what the fuck he's doing now? This guy.
Oh yeah. That
When
guy.
because I had the courage to dive into a project that I didn't really know what I was doing and figure it out along the way and ask for help. I went to the auto parts store to buy the parts. I asked the guys there, I'm like, tell me everything that you might assume that I know nothing. Teach me and tell me what I need to know. I'm not afraid to be dumb here. I know that I am. So what can you teach me to make this easier for me? And they gave me some really helpful hints. People will help you if you ask them to. If you're not afraid of appearing incompetent. Like, guess what? I am incompetent. I am incompetent at
But
speaking
there's
up.
competence in that. Like you get to competence through going through that.
Mhm. Yeah, you don't get there by faking competence. Like if I was afraid to ask for help, then made a mistake or screwed something up, and then like I didn't get any farther by acting like I knew what the hell I was doing. It's the same thing with a woman. I don't get any farther with her by putting on false confidence and acting like I've got it all together when I don't. I don't get any farther with her. I
There's always this like shitty beginning part that we have to be able to go through where you're, unconsciously incompetent is where most people are in most things, right?
mhm.
You don't know how bad you are in most things. And
Yeah,
then
you don't
there's
know
the
what you don't
shitty,
know.
you don't know what you don't know. And that's where most of us are in most of everything. And then you start doing something and you're consciously incompetent. You start to realize, oh my God, I don't know this. And there's this stage and this feeling you have to go through this period of this like shitty beginning.
Hmm.
And most people can't hang there. They can't hang in the shitty beginning of anything. And that shitty beginning, whether it's in ball bearings or it's having to do with learning a language or it's even how to pleasure your woman or how to listen or how to surf, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. You're going to go through a period of time where you know that you're bad at it and you suck at it and you have to keep going through that period. And then all of a sudden you're like, huh, you start to become more competent. But that only goes through that shitty period. And that shitty period is just has to be realized that is like the test
Hmm.
and that most people don't go through that period. And if you can make it through that period and come out the other side, you can, that's being average is on the other side. Really, it's not like excellence, but that's good enough for most things. Like
Well, you have to
what
get
you
to
were just doing,
average before you can then,
excel.
right, then you can get better at something. You can improve on it. You
Exactly.
can learn new skills. You can get new tools. And, where we're kind of starting on this was speaking up and speaking with clarity and just saying what it is that you want, saying what it is that you need, saying what it is that you mean, speaking
Right.
the truth with clarity. To a woman, when we are wounded as men, speaking the truth with clarity feels dangerous.
Yes.
Women assume, I think, that this is an easy thing for men. This is hard. This is the hardest thing I think most men have to do, is to look at her and say, I am unhappy with you and the way that you are showing up in this relationship, or I'm happy with you, but I could be way happier if this relationship was like this instead. And to say it with clarity, to express their displeasure is really damn hard. Like that was and still is probably the hardest thing for me. Even as a dominant for 5.5 years in a 24/7 dom sub dynamic, it's still the hardest thing for me to say, not like that, or I'm displeased with this.
Mm. Yeah, I think another parallel to that is when I'm un, dissatisfied with myself. When I'm, we've talked about this before, but when something's arising where I'm just really in a bad state with myself and feeling, um, I was thinking about the word insecure. You're not secure. You're not feeling safe within your own self. I have some massive work that I've had to do on myself just to get to a baseline of not allowing myself to get into a panic. I used to have a lot of panic attacks and have a lot of mental health challenges, and having to work through that. There are still some things that have arisen where I have to confront those sides of myself, and being in that state and then being clear with her that says, I'm not in a state right now to be able to proceed with this as we are, or having a script that says, I'm displeased with myself in this moment. I need to take a time out. I need to leave. I cannot proceed. That's also been really, really, really challenging. I think, uh, and how to do that in a way where the frequency and the energy isn't needy and chippy. And I think that's just today. I was in a state where there was something I was discussing with Rachel, and I didn't pre-pave my energy, and my frequency was off. My energy was off, and no matter how, I didn't have a script or something that to go to, and I got in a chippy place, and it just feels a little chippy, and it was recognized, and I she actually was the one that needed to pull it back and kind of be a little bit more here, and I was able to right there. We just had to do it in that moment, but it just was such an example to me where these these states when we feel off or we're in a frequency or energy that's not in our riz or not in our confidence, if we can have a script or have a go-to procedure in the same way that, like, if there's a crisis and you're an ER medic, you know what to do, or you're a lifeguard, you just have, and no matter how much adrenaline you have pumping through you, you just know what to do. I know that it has served me to have a script or something to just know what to do when I'm feeling charged to get myself out of that charge, or when I'm in an interaction with her, and it could feel robotic and it could feel uh, not Matthew McConaughey, not natural in my skin. It could have zero risk, but it's a liminal, it's an in between stage where it'll allow me to buy some time to get back into my body and into that. And I think having a way to navigate that is really helpful.
I usually laugh at myself
There you go.
when I catch myself starting to go down like one of those places. I still have my things, and I see them more and more clearly every day. And I've just seen a couple of them this week where like I just noticed little way that she reacts kind of makes me go, "Eh." And the unconscious way of dealing with this would be to go to her and say, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. So if you could not do that, I'd appreciate it. Right. And,
Right.
and then she might even say, oh, well, I don't want you to experience me that way. So I'll change what I'm doing. Well, now, not only is she having to make herself act different in order to avoid upsetting me, I have now given myself the permission to avoid looking at why it is that I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
And the whole thing then is just an avoidance. And that's the unconscious way of dealing with it. The conscious way of dealing with it for me is, oh, interesting. I notice that I react internally this way when she does this little thing. And it's like the one I'm talking about here is so simple, but when she's rushed and in a hurry and I'm trying to give her attention and she doesn't reciprocate that attention, I just noticed a little tension in me. Like, so the conscious way of dealing with that is what's going on inside of me that's uncomfortable? Because if I can clear that up, then she can just be however she is and I can be in an even more accepting place of that.
For sure. I think that's been the majority of my work of recently is that last thing that you said is what's going on inside of me that's uncomfortable with what she's doing over here. And then going and spending the time reflecting, writing, thinking, dying to myself, having ego deaths, crashing, and coming out the other side lighter and stronger. I think I always know that when I feel lighter and stronger together, it's just, that's the confidence, that's the charisma. Like that's where you kind of get into a space. There's a lightness to it, but also a strength to it that's a solid.
And that just shows you too that that lightness is already in there.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting exercise that anyone who's listening to this can go through this little exercise. Think of something that's really challenging to you. And just imagine if that situation that really is confronting, it's hard for you. It puts you in a really tough spot internally. Just imagine if you were free of that feeling in response to that situation. Like if you didn't react that way at all. If you weren't upset, if you were just okay. Can you feel a little bit of that lightness, a little bit of the weight lifting off of your shoulders of not
Oh
having that
yeah.
thing affect you so much anymore? Well, guess what? That feeling of lightness shows you that already exists inside you. You just imagine letting go of that.
Yep.
And it's already there. So if you
Yep.
actually can let go of it, then you can live in that lightness for good.
Yep.
It's already there.
It's true.
And that's what I seek is a life lived free and easy. And that's how you get to be in that place where you're confident in your own skin and comfortable in your own skin because you're not worried. Like, oh, she acted like that? It's got nothing to do with me.
Right. You're not like becoming a victim of her energy and her frequency
Right.
or her shit.
You're just doing your own thing and then you're
Yep.
just loving her and you're just leading her and you're just speaking up for what matters and what you want. And like, that's freedom.
Yep.
I think that's what we all want. I think that's why we get into these dom sub relationships. I think that's why we do all of this work. It's why anybody who's still listening to this podcast almost an hour into it is still listening to it because they want to be free of all of those constraints, all of those limitations, all of that frustration and that tension that we can carry around with us. We want to let it go.
Yep.
That's what I want. It's what I've continually worked on for years now.
And the only way is through. I think about this lately. I've been thinking a lot about this story that someone told me about how Buffalo, when there's a storm coming, they actually just go through the storm because it's the fastest way to get to the other. You know what I mean? They
Mm-hmm.
don't like try to run around the side or whatever. The only way is through, right? So the only way to the lightness is actually through a period of time that feels actually more heavy. And it goes through that period, that shitty period of that conscious incompetence. I think that's the same thing for these energies and these feelings. You want to feel lighter. There's a lighter that's on the other side of the work. That's confidence. That's not an avoidance. Other people, you feel light by avoiding feeling everything, but ultimately you're heavy. People will feel that.
Yeah. Or you numb yourself because you just
It's
can't
true.
handle the discomfort and jump to some distraction or some substance or some, whatever it is, old habit that you use to keep yourself from having to be present with whatever it is that you're not wanting to deal with.
And we all do that occasionally, or a
Yeah.
lot, or not a lot, depending on what.
Just another one of those patterns that we can see and decide, oh, I'm going to try not doing that. I wonder what would
Right.
happen if I just actually stayed present in this situation instead of jumping to my phone, or instead of having a drink, or instead of having doing some weed, or playing video games, or whatever it is. What would happen if I
Right.
just stayed present in the situation?
Right.
Maybe just for 15 seconds. Can I handle that?
Yep.
I think it would be really interesting to have a whole conversation about numbing, and
It would be.
both of our experiences with that, and how we've dealt with stuff, and how we've gotten out of those patterns, and maybe where we're still in them, because that's another thing. Like, you just keep seeing more little ways that you zone out and disconnect. And
It's true. It's true. Yeah, you know what what they say about life is true, that the reward of a job well done is more work, right? Like,
fuck, it's not fair.
I mean, that's the point of not numbing yourself. Like, what I feel is, I actually feel like the challenges don't diminish. You actually, the reward of a more competent, conscious life is more responsibility, not less. And she becomes your responsibility. The moments in between each other become your responsibility. All of it becomes your responsibility. And the irony is that in order to take control of that, there's a letting go part of it. There's a paradox to it. Like, you're not necessarily controlling her, but you're having the consciousness to be able to do your own work, where your presence is a net benefit and dictates the energy of the room, dictates her energy. Just by your presence, she calms.
Yeah. And that is how responsibility gets to be felt without feeling like a burden.
Correct.
Because
Because then that goes back to the reward. You get something from it
mhm,
too.
yeah, and it's also relatively easy to be responsible when you are in control of the variables, and the biggest one of those variables being yourself and your inner state.
Right.
Being in charge is actually very easy when you can lead things the way you want to. It only gets challenging and feels burdensome when you feel out of control.
Right. It's true.
Well, good talking to you as always, buddy. I could do this for hours, but I can't. But
No, it's good to talk to you too, buddy. We will, till next week, be back here, do it again.
we'll do it again next week. See you, man.
Yeah. Thank you.